Hi, my name is Daisy, and my presentation is on Minotaure magazine. Minotaure was an art and literature magazine printed in Paris between 1933 and 1939. It was founded by Albert Scara, a bookseller and publisher, with editors Andre Breton and Pierre Mabel. Each edition of the magazine included contributions from artists, writers, philosophers, critics, and psychoanalysts and was meant to be read as a collective work. Despite taking place during the Surrealist movement, Minotaure did not start out as a Surrealist magazine, but with Andre Breton, one of the leaders of the Surrealist movement, as editor of the publication, it quickly became one. However, it differed from other Surrealist publications at the time because it kept politics out. Before we explore some of the more expanded goals and views of the magazine, let's fully understand what the Surrealist art movement was and what kind of ideologies it held. Andre Breton defines surrealism as a purely psychological form of automatic reflex by which one sets out to express either verbally or in writing or in any other fashion the operation of thought, dictation from thought in the absence of any exercise or control on the part of reason outside every aesthetic or moral preoccupation. That is obviously an artist's take on surrealism, but it is much easier to understand through seeing where it started from. Surrealism stemmed from a small group that was a part of the Dada movement. The Dada rejected all that art was. They protested politics and the war, but they did so in their own way. Andre Breton was a part of this movement, but felt that it didn't have a purpose or language to tie it together. The lack of language was in part that Dadists rejected the idea of outdated artistic language. This and some of the ideologies that Dada held before evolved into the Surrealist movement, and in 1924 Andre Breton wrote the Surrealist Manifesto. It carried a lot of similarities to Dadaism, but it went further beyond what reality is. Before Minotaure, the Surrealists put out two other publications. The first was the Surrealist Revolution Journal. It was made to look serious and carried on the ideas of Dadaism while also progressing the Surrealist movement. The journal had its final publication in 1929. The second, Surrealism in the Service of the Revolution, was a publication that started shortly after in 1930. It saved less room for art and literature and was instead more focused on politics while continuing to advance the Surrealist movement. Both of these publications shaped what kind of magazine Minotaure was to be. Albert Scara, the founder of the magazine, specifically said that Minotaure was to leave politics out. Dadaism and the beginning of Surrealism were too focused on politics, and Scara wanted this publication to focus more on arts and culture. The publication was aimed to introduce Surrealism to new theorists and artists. The name of the magazine and the creature that was often featured on the cover were important to what the magazine was trying to convey to its audience. A minotaur is a creature from Greek mythology. It has the body of a human and the head of a bull. In terms of the magazine, it was a symbol that was then understood as an opposition to an attack on the merely academic and intellectual, as well as a token of permanence and as a promise of universal meanings concealed under the manifest content of reality. Each cover of Minotaure featured this creature through an interpretation of a different artist, but the first cover came from Pablo Picasso, who viewed the Minotaur as his alter ego. This is Minotaure's first publication, from June 1st, 1933. Designed by Pablo Picasso, his iteration is shown through strong juxtapositions. The creature itself has a strong body, with a head of shaggy hair and holds a dagger. Eleanor Gaydon, author of the journal titled Picasso and the Minotaur, believes that this interpretation shows a self-confident male that can pursue its lust and overflowing vitality of its animal nature to the fullest. This strong beast is contrasted with the paper doily behind it, which inhibits the opposition between feminine and masculine. At the time of publication, there was a lot of interest in the Cretan mythological cycle, which is where the Minotaur is from. This sparked an area of interest between anthropology and modernism, along with Freud's ideas of psychic and subconscious thoughts. The second issue of Minotaur featured photography from the ethnographic expedition Mission Dakar Djibouti, which traversed Central Africa between 1931 and 1933. These photos were displayed in museums in Paris, but their features in Minotaur put them in a different context. Ian Walker, author of Phantom Africa, Photography Between Surrealism and Ethnography, believes that if the pictures were to have been in the Surrealist Revolution, they would have been put in a much more political context. Minotaur, for this reason, seemed to tame surrealism in a way which included its desires to embrace the otherness of other cultures. Minotaure was viewed as a luxurious magazine. It had large prints, often in color, and the covers were made by some of the top artists of the time. It focused on this realm where anthropology and art met, but opposed to previous surrealist publications, it didn't focus on politics. It went much further into surrealism than that. Prior to this project, I was not familiar with this publication, but I was familiar with the surrealist movement and some of the artists that came with it. I think the publications are really cool. Surrealist art is interesting because it is a bit easier to pick apart and apply meaning to different aspects of it and then see how it comes together as a whole. But I think this publication specifically opened my eyes to how politics play a role in these publications, and I also found it interesting to compare all three different publications that came out during the Surrealist movement and how they were all very different, but they were all able to get their views and ideas of what they saw as surrealism across in the same way. Thank you for listening.